Okay. Good day, all. I can see we have few people who have joined. We can just give for about 1 minute more while we wait for more participants. And after that, we can start. Thank you. Okay, just checking that we can all hear me.
That's correct. I can hear you.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. So when you're good, you can call in Phil and Malcolm to turn on their video so that they can start.
Okay, so just testing. I can see Malcolm. I feel, are you there?
Yes, I am here. I don't seem to be able to turn my video on at the moment.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It says choose video filter. I don't know what that means. Yeah, I can't turn my video on for some reason.
Okay, that's fine. We might have to do without that. We have your picture, which will show up at some point. Guess they would have to. We will have to make do with that. That's if you cannot sort it out.
Yeah, it was on to begin with, but when I switched the video off, there seems to be no way for me to switch it back on again.
Okay, so let me try and handle that from here. Yeah, I'll sort you out, right? Okay, Phil, can you try turning on your video again to see?
Yeah, there's no option for me to turn it on. I've got the 3 dots against my name, and I can mute my audio. I can choose a virtual background or choose a video filter, but none of those things do anything.
No, so I assume, so on your video, there is a red line across it, right?
Yeah.
So click on that, just click on it. And
no, I can't click on it. When I put my mouse over it, it gets covered up by a thing that says more. And under more, I get pin and rename.
Oh, it worked perfectly well just now, and I'm wondering why.
Yeah.
I've done everything from this end. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
don't worry. We'll get
Okay.
by. I've seen
right.
I've seen Phil before, and it's not great.
Okay, that's fine. So we can go on for now. I think we have a number of people joining. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our participants across the globe. We welcome you to this month's webinar series being organized by the Society of Petroleum Engineers Lagos section. This is the last webinar in the Petroleum in engineering series, and it's promises to be very interesting. We've chosen a subject of interest, which will be focused on the future of LNG, the past, the present, and the future. And we have two key presenters. These are Malcolm and Phil. So thank you. So as way of introduction, my name is Akanimo Nkanga, and I'll be your moderator for today. So going into the agenda, we have in a way done the welcoming part. Next, we'll cover the safety moment. Next, we'll have the opening speech, which will be handled by the section chair. After which, I would talk about the profile of our speakers. And once that is done, we're going to deep in depth into the subject matter. After which we're going to Q&A, that will be handled by Phil Tophope. And the final part, we will give a vote of thanks, after which we'll give an update of our upcoming event. So straight into the safety moment. First point is for us to be aware of where we are, of our surroundings, whether you're in the office or you're at home. Just be aware of what is going on around you. For those in Lagos, we all know that there's a ban on the use of motorcycles, and there have been updates of there have been a potential for protest. We haven't seen that yet, which is good, but something for us to be aware of. Next is to avoid eating while we are talking, so we don't get choked. If you're driving, avoid making use of your cell phones. If you have any call or you want to make a call, you can choose to stop the car, pull the car off the road, and then make your calls. If you're watching or taking part from home, you can take breaks, maybe every 5 or 10 minutes. Just stand up and stretch your body. Also, it's good to have maybe a cup of tea or a glass of water by the side, just to ensure you stay hydrated. Now, we are not out of the woods when it comes to COVID-19. So the safety protocols are still on and very active. So please stay safe. So there are some guiding rules for this webinar. If you want to make a comment or you want to make a chat. So the first rule is ensure that your microphones are muted if you are not speaking. And if you want to ask a question, we have two options. You either use the chat box, which is by the side, or raise your hand and wait for your turn. Once we get to your turn, we would tell you when to speak. This is just to help us not to disrupt the flow. So again, we should turn off our videos so that the focus would be on the speakers and on their slides. So please also pay attention to what is being done, as in the subject matter. If you know you have anything that might take your attention away, you can take this time and maybe close the door or just shut it off. Okay, so that's about all. So at this point, I would yield the floor to Priscilla. We will take this part on behalf of the section chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Satan. Good morning. Good morning, Malcolm. Good morning, Phil.
Salam.
Good morning, our participants. Thank you for joining today's webinar. As Akan already mentioned, this is the last part of the petroleum engineering series webinar. And it's my pleasure to welcome two gentlemen who have been in the industry for decades. Today, they're going to be talking to us about the past, the present, and the future of LNG. They have a story that I believe will be interesting. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. And I want to thank all SP members, board members, and everybody who's taking time to join this webinar today. Please feel free to ask your questions, post it, and we'll be attended to. Thank you. And I wish us all a time here. Thanks.
Okay, thank
Over to
you. Okay, thank you very much. So we go to the next line of action, which is the profile of our speakers. So first we have Malcolm Harrison. He's the owner of Harris Seeds Limited. Malcolm has been knocking around the energy industry for decades. He discovered the teachings of Aristotle, the importance of sharing, of legacy, and of helping others. His goal in the few years he has left is to share the knowledge that he has to give a leg up to the decision makers and the leaders of tomorrow. He's going to talk about the wonders of LNG and the LNG market, and use his crystal ball to tell us where we think we will be in the next 10 years. So thank you very much, Malcolm. Next, we have Field Todd Hope. He's the director upstream concept in engineering. So Phil Topob has worked in the oil and gas industry for over 40 years with some large companies, some large projects around the world, which is good for us. That means he has worked across the globe, and we will get to benefit from that. He's also an expert in front-end design and in training and in developing the new generation of engineers and project managers. So once more, we welcome Phil Todd Hope. Okay, so Phil and Malcolm, I yield the floor to both of you at this point.
Thanks, thanks, I can. Look, so I'm Malcolm here talking. I am going to share my screen. Let's see if I can do that. And if I've successfully shared my screen, you should see lots of happy smiling faces.
Yes, yes, I can.
saying hello from the south of France. My next challenge is now to put some slides on the screen. And I think if all's gone well, I've successfully done it. You've seen something that says welcome.
We're ready.
Yes, yes, I can see it.
In which case, Phil, I think over to you.
Thanks, Malcolm. Okay, great. No, Akanimo, thank you very much. He's kindly already introduced us, so I won't repeat anything he said. Now, Malcolm and I share a background in upstream oil and gas business, and we worked together in BG Group for a number of years. Now, since a few years back when we officially retired, we've both been doing consultancy work and also running training courses. During the pandemic the other year, we started using some of our training material to create short 1-hour webinars on a number of subjects. Now, today's webinar is an updated version of one that Malcolm gave last year online. Okay, next slide, Malcolm. So while Malcolm is running through the presentation, indeed, I will monitor the chat panel. And at the end of the presentation, we'll try and answer as many of your questions as we can. So as I said, this webinar is an extraction from more expansive training material. There's only so much that we can cover in round about an hour. If you are interested in learning any more on this or indeed any other subject you think we can help with, please do feel free to contact us. Okay, with that, next slide, Malcolm, and I'll hand over to you for the presentation.
Great. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, young Phil. As Phil said, this is ambitious to talk about the past, present, and future of LNG in only about an hour, but I'm going to do my best. And this is the way in which I'm going to structure it. I don't know how many of you subscribe to Buddhism, but Buddhism talks of 7 steps to spiritual enlightenment: love, faith, integrity, simplicity, and so on. You'll be pleased to know that LNG is easier. In terms of enlightenment to LNG, what I'm planning to do is divide the presentation into 3 steps. The history in terms of the LNG industry. How did we get to where we are today? Just exactly where are we today? Excuse me while I cough. Thank you. And then finally, what does the future look like? Of course, nobody actually knows the future, but we'll share a view. So to kick off then, the history of LNG, how did we get to where we are? This is the oldest picture that I could find of the world of LNG. This is dated back in 1957, 1959, apologies. This is the first international trade of LNG. A small ship by today's standards, we'll come to today's standards later, 5,000 meters cubed, natural gas that was liquefied in Louisiana in the southern United States, was shipped to the United Kingdom, where they used it to blend the existing gas supply so they could achieve the calorific value that they wanted. So that's, what does that make? 90, that seems to be about 60 years since the first LNG shipment. And it's come a long way since then. I guess the first thing I wanted to talk about, why does it even exist as an industry? From the outside, it seems insane that you would turn gas into liquid, ship it halfway around the world, and then turn it back into gas again. And this next slide tries to show of all the different ways in which you can get your gas to the market, where LNG sits. So what you'll see here is essentially on one scale, the distance to the market, and in joule units for those. So we've got kilometers on the lower axis, miles on the upper one. So the distance from the market, and then the quantity of gas that's available to be transported to market. And again, in 2 separate units, million standard cubic feet a day here, million standard meters cubed a day here. So if your quantity of gas is relatively low, then the most economic way of getting it to the end user is quite often is to burn it, to generate power and ship the power. What happens though, as the distance from the market increases, because the losses when you ship electricity are relatively large, at some point you reach the stage where you've got low quantities, great distances, and actually there's pretty much nothing you can do with the gas and there's no economic use for it. As the quantities go up, it becomes more economic to put it in a pipeline. And as you can see where LNG fits, where you've got relatively large quantities of gas and you've got a long distance from the market, that's the niche for LNG. And the reason for that is that you can ship LNG 5,000 kilometers, 3,000 miles, and lose relatively little of it along the way. So it comes into its own here. Some of you may be familiar with gas to liquids, which if you wind the clock back a few years, there's a theory that actually converting your gas into some form of transport fuel, gasoline or diesel, had an application in this area. In fact, as LNG has become more economic at lower volumes, gas to liquids, in my view, is largely dead, apart from in maybe one or two niche applications. So that's sort of where it fits. High quantities, long distances. And then you come to, so who has it? Who has it and who needs it? And that's what this next graph tries to show. There's an awful lot of information on this one graph, but what this does for a selection of countries, it plots the total gas reserves of that country on this axis, and on the vertical axis, the total reserves divided by the domestic consumption. So the scale here is in trillion cubic feet. The scale here should actually be in years. In years, reserves divided by consumption is the number of years that the gas reserves would last if you were to consume them just domestically. And then as you see, color coded. So the red dots are countries that export LNG. The blue export by pipeline. The yellow do both. And the black are the importers. And if you draw this line from top left to bottom right, you see something which intuitively I think is correct. What you see is actually the countries with the largest reserves in the world are Russia and Iran. The country with the largest capacity in terms of years is Qatar. So if you look at the gas reserves in Qatar, Qatar has nearly 1,000 years of gas in its North Field. And not surprisingly, it tends to be the countries that have got surplus gas that supply to the countries that need it. So down here in this corner, you've got Japan and South Korea, increasingly countries in Europe, you've got the United Kingdom, Netherlands, and so on. And then there are a few outliers. So you could look at this and you could say, why does Iran not export LNG? I think you might be able to answer that yourself. Why does Turkmenistan not export LNG? That one's a little bit harder, maybe. Why does Kazakhstan? Is Kazakhstan here somewhere? Why does Kazakhstan not export LNG? Well, actually, Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan don't have a coast, so don't have the option of putting stuff into ships. And here we have Nigeria, a well-known LNG exporter for quite some years, with reserves that could satisfy domestic consumption for something like 200 years. So I wanted to take a closer look at then how this gas is moved around the world. Again, lots of power in pictures. This shows you the movements of gas around the world. The blue lines represent LNG. The red lines represent gas. Sorry, so the red lines represent pipelines. You might notice from this that one of the the largest exporter in terms of gas via pipeline is Russia and those countries formerly part of the USSR, Kazakhstan. This is Kazakhstan exporting here. And they collectively, this is billion cubic meters per annum, and I apologize for the mix of units. Russia exports about 170 billion cubic meters per annum of gas, predominantly to Europe. You'll see big trade here between Canada and the United States. There's some here between Algeria, Libya, and Europe. And the blue lines, as I say, are LNG. LNG today represents about 50% of the gas that's traded across borders. LNG has been growing for the last 20 or 30 years at the rate of about 8% per annum, and pipeline at about 2%. So today it represents about 50% of traded gas. And if you believe some of the numbers in the press, there are something like 550 billion cubic meters per annum of LNG liquefaction projects that are under investigation. That would represent 3 times the export of current export of Russia. So it's set to become more dominant than its current 50%. This shows you some of the big players in the world of LNG and LNG movements. So on the left-hand side, you've got the main, the dominant producers of LNG. On the right-hand side, you have the dominant consumers. So you'll see effectively Australia and Qatar are equal first. Australia just exported a little bit more in 2020. Qatar was second. The United States has got the highest growth rate. And when I talked of those LNG projects in the pipeline, something like 35% of them are in the United States. And then Russia comes in at 4th place. And the consumers still largely in the Asia Pacific area. So Japan wins the race. China is growing rapidly. Collectively, the Asia Pacific represents the largest global LNG flow. India is growing, and Europe, it says here Europe imports dropped in 2020. That's more related to pandemic than anything else. So that we're still on the stage of the history of LNG. That's a big global picture. I wanted to talk about 3 more things. The first is how it works, the technology associated with liquefaction, how it's transported, the ships, and how it's gasified. So this next slide gives you some idea of how it works. This is a slide which shows what's called the Air Products C3MR. That's propane mixed refrigerant liquefaction process. And essentially C3MR, because those are the 2 refrigerants that are used in the process of LNG liquefaction. Most of the early stage LNG plants use this technology. And in fact, until about 1999, they probably had 90% of the market. And this is how it works. It starts off by, here in the top left-hand corner, essentially you have to remove anything that might freeze or anything that might cause harm in the liquefaction process, which really means taking out water, taking out acid gas, CO2 and H2S, and taking out mercury, because mercury attacks aluminium. And as we'll come to later, you'll see there's quite a lot of aluminium that's used in this process. So having taken this stuff out, there's then the gas is then progressively cooled. It's cooled first of all against propane. Propane at different pressures and so different temperatures. And propane will take the gas down to the number you see on your screen here, about -32 Celsius. It then enters this thing, which is a gigantic heat exchanger, which I'll come to in a moment, in which it is further cooled against mixed refrigerant. Now, the mixed refrigerant is a mix of nitrogen, methane, ethane, propane, where the exact composition can be adjusted to give you the most efficient performance for your particular gas. So what's going on here? We start with refrigerant, which is essentially at atmospheric pressure. It's compressed, it's cooled, it's further compressed, it's cooled, and then it's chilled against propane until you reach this point where it's at about 45 bar and it's about 32 degrees. You then push it into this heat exchanger. You progressively reduce its temperature until it's cold enough to liquefy the LNG. You drop its pressure to atmospheric pressure across a valve. The refrigerant achieves temperatures, as it says here, of minus 163 or so, and that is sufficiently cold to liquefy your LNG. And that's in a nutshell, that's it. It's an industry that is dominated by a number of critical factors. Large machines, the propane compressors, mixed refrigerant compressors, will be some of the largest beasts on the planet. Large drivers that can be 150, 160 megawatts, typically gas turbines, and large complicated exchanges. And the reason that Air Products dominated the market in the early stage was they were the only company in the world who could fabricate one of these exchanges. And I'll show you a picture of what this looks like. This is one in fabrication. When it's installed vertically. Here it's horizontal, but essentially you have kilometers and kilometers of aluminium tubing with different streams flowing in each of the tubes. And when it's mounted vertically, the liquid refrigerant will flow on the outside of these tubes, and it's that will convert the LNG, convert the natural gas into liquid. One of the features of this, the tubes can tolerate high pressures, the shell not so much. And the surface area in terms of meters squared per meter cubed of exchanger is enormous. And so I say this is because Air Products were the only ones who could fabricate this. They largely dominated the industry. And then about 20 years ago, somebody broke the monopoly. The company that broke monopoly was the company that Phil and I both worked for, BG. And there's another technology, ConocoPhillips technology. And same sort of thing at the beginning. You have to take out the water and anything that might freeze or do damage. Instead of using mixed refrigerant, this uses pure components. So there's an exchange against propane. There's an exchange against ethylene. There's an exchange against methane. And ultimately, you achieve exactly the same thing, liquid at minus 160 degrees. But the clever part about this is oh, sorry, one thing I should mention. Again, if you look at these exchanges, these are complicated beasts. So the first one has 4 streams going through it. The second has 3. The third has 3. Still complicated exchange, and still you need very large surface area in order to refrigerate the LNG. But the neat thing about this was, because of the boiling characteristics of pure components, you don't need the spiral wound heat exchanger. And actually what you use are these things called plate fin heat exchangers, which look something like this. Now, these are fabricated by about 4 or 5 different companies around the world, so there's no longer a monopoly. And they're essentially, it's a stack of aluminium plates. The gas or the liquid or the refrigerant flows between the plates. You can, by whatever you do with the headers on here, you can direct your particular stream through however many passes that you want. Between the passes, you have aluminium fins, and hence the name plate fin heat exchanger. That, Phil, I'm hoping you're listening in. I'm going to ask if you could keep an eye on the time for me, because I'm struggling at the moment. So if you think I'm going too slowly, please feel free to speed me up.
Yeah, okay, we'll do, Malcolm.
Thank you. That was everything. That was everything. That was a whistle-stop tour of liquefaction. It was 2 technologies. There are many more technologies. Air Products still dominate the world. They have a package of 4 or 5 different technologies, and they have about 70% of the global market. ConocoPhillips have the majority of the rest, but things are changing in the world of LNG. There are 5 or 6 new companies muscling in. So that's, now we've turned our LNG and we turned our natural gas into liquids. Now we've got to get it to where it's needed. We need to ship it halfway around the world, maybe. So just a few words on ships. There are 2 main types of ship for transporting LNG. This thing is called a what is this thing called? This is a Moss Maritime. Essentially, shipping LNG in spherical tanks. You can see here 1, 2, 3, 4 spherical tanks. There are 4 things you have to think about when you're shipping LNG. The first thing is, when you chill these tanks down from ambient temperature to minus 160, they shrink, and you have to allow for the contraction. The second thing is, the hull of this ship is made out of carbon steel. It really wouldn't like seeing LNG at minus 160. So in some way, you've got to be sure you can protect the ship's hull, not just from the temperature of the LNG, but against any potential leakage. The other thing that's a big deal is sloshing. So you can see if you've got LNG in here, as if you've got rough seas, then the LNG will move backwards and forwards. And if you ever tried driving your car with an aquarium on the back seat, you'll know what I mean. But that can be a big issue. And then finally, the ship comes back empty, as of course do many oil tankers. So it has to be ballasted. With an oil tanker, you can use seawater for ballast, but you don't put seawater in an LNG tank. So the ballast thing is a little different. So these were the early stage LNG carriers were spheres, easy to cope with that expansion contraction, insulated between the tank and the hull of the ship, but relatively inefficient use of the storage volume. And because the levels of LNG are quite high, the centers of gravity were quite high, so maneuverability not so good. These ships on the lower level use membranes, technically far more complicated, but today by far the most dominant ship type that is used for shipping LNG. I've got a picture that shows you what this thing looks like on the inside, which I think is quite impressive. This is one of 4 compartments in this particular ship. 4 compartments to reduce the impact of sloshing, and it's hard to see here, but the walls of this tank. This is a stainless steel tank. The walls of this tank are waffled, and the neat thing about the waffles, it means that when the tank cools down, the waffles contract, but the outside of the tank largely doesn't move. So it means that you can almost fill the hull of the ship with LNG. Of course, you have to have insulation around here to both keep the LNG cold and protect the ship's hull, but you get a much higher capacity of storage. You get a much bigger issue of sloshing. So with these things, they have to be less than 20% full or more than 80% full, or you could have issues with maneuverability transport. But that's ships. And finally, so now we've put it in a ship. We're going to ship it to shore. And this you'd think would be the easy bit. Now we're going to turn it back into gas. 4 main things that you have to think about when turning it back into gas. The first is unloading the ship. So this is not a continuous process. Obviously, you bring the ship in. You have to be sure that the lines are cold. You unload it relatively quickly because time is money, which leads to gas displacement. So then you have to think about what are you going to do with the gas that's displaced. You turn it back into liquid. So unloading the ship is a big issue. Storing the LNG is an expensive issue. These are large storage tanks, and are the largest cost item on an import terminal. You have to think about the effect of heat leaking in. So this LNG is boiling all of the time. And if you're not sending it out, you turn it back into liquid. And then finally, you think about how you're going to turn it into gas. And it's sometimes you use seawater. Sometimes you'd use a hot flue gas. Sometimes you use submerged combustion, and you burn some of the gas in order to vaporize the LNG. And that, quick time check, Phil, if I can, how many minutes have I been speaking for?
So Malcolm, you got 15 minutes left.
Excellent, excellent. That's good. That was the history of LNG. Very quickly. The next thing was then, so where are we today? Where are we today? Where we are today is here. Around the world, 450 million tons per annum of liquefaction capacity, which is on average is producing 75% of the time. So actually, this is in 2020, 350 million tons were exported, being shipped in 570 different ships, of which 40 are floating storage units or floating storage and regasification units. I'm going to come to those in a minute. 850 million tons per annum of regasification, which is used only 35% of the time, because still many of these plants are used for peak shaving in winter or peak demand times, and 115 million tons per annum of this floating storage regasification units, which is essentially an offshore regasification unit. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them. So that's where the market is today, and at this point in time, 450 million tons per annum of capacity, an additional 140 million tons per annum is in the process of construction. So this will grow by 30% within the next 4 or 5 years. And as I mentioned before, about 900 million tons per annum that's waiting in the wings. So it will grow. There's a question of how much. One of the big changes since the early days is that in the early days of LNG, you didn't financially sanction a project until the sales of the LNG were tied up in a long-term sales and purchase agreement, a contract of maybe 20 years. Today, gas is becoming more and more like oil, or LNG is becoming more and more like oil. A lot of LNG, 40%, is sold on the spot market. The impact that has had, if you look at this graph on the right-hand side, and I'd ask you just to look at the red and the yellow lines. But essentially, the red line is the price at which you can buy natural gas, in this case, in the United States. The yellow line is the price at which you can sell LNG. As a rule, this is in, by the way, is in the units here are dollars per million BTUs. So you can buy, back in 2019, 2018, you could buy natural gas at $3 a million BTUs. You could sell it for 10. Just as a rule of thumb, it takes about 4 to turn it into liquid and ship it. So you buy it for 3, you turn it into liquid for 7, you've got a markup there of about 25%. Now, one of the things that I find interesting is the impact that Russia invading Ukraine is going to have on this. So just remember these numbers. 2020, we were buying gas for 2 and we were selling it for 8 as LNG. Look what happened since. 2 here. These are the prices over the last year. So you'll see that this is the colors have changed, but this lower line is the price of gas in the United States. The upper line is the price that LNG was trading at in the Far East and in Europe. So remember, at the end of 2020, we could sell it for $9 a million BTUs. It peaked in February of this year at 90. At 90. You can buy it for 3, you sell it for 90. The LNG business is a very good business to be in, thanks to Vladimir Putin, although he hasn't done maybe other people such a great favor. So that's one big change. LNG has drifted towards becoming an economy, which means that the risk, the financial risk, sits with the seller. The other thing that's happened is LNG has moved offshore. Many of you may have heard of Shell's Prelude. This is it's offshore Australia. It is the largest offshore structure ever. A ship that's 500 meters long, 80 meters wide, and does everything offshore, produces condensate, LPG, and LNG. Cost a lot of money. FID in 2011, started up, in fact, in 2018, had lots of problems since there was shut down for most of 2020. Ran through 2021, and then there's a fire at the end of 2021, and there's just recently started up again. So that's offshore liquefaction. The other big change is offshore gasification, regasification. Here we have Lithuania. This is a floating storage regasification unit where the LNG ship will berth alongside. The LNG is stored in the hull of the ship, and on the surface of the ship here, you see the facilities for regasification. They called this the FSRU Independence. It's in Lithuania, which is next door to Russia. It would be far cheaper to take pipeline gas from Russia, but I guess the reasons that they don't, and the reason they called it the Independence is fairly obvious. And this is another. This one's in Dubai. And there we go. I'm going to sprint on a little bit. Why would you regasify offshore rather than onshore? There are some very good reasons. One of which is about schedule. And this I think we'll see a lot of these things drifting their way towards Europe in the coming years. To build an offshore terminal takes you about 42 months. If you build a ship with all of the regasification facilities, you can probably save 6 months. If you buy a ship that already exists and convert it to regasify, you can probably get your ship in 27 months. If you take one that's already operating and you just reassign it, i.e. you move it from Dubai to Estonia or whatever, you can be online within 10 months. And I think you can imagine with the troubles in Europe at the moment, there's a big interest in the reassignment of FSRUs, because potentially Europe can reduce its dependence on gas in maybe a year or 15 months, as opposed to waiting nearly 4 years. That's my helicopter flight of LNG today. Phil, how many more minutes? Is anybody listening?
Malcolm, you've got about 6 minutes left. Sorry.
That is perfect. That is perfect. So here we go. So that was the past. That was the past, the present, and here we have the future. This is one person's, McKinsey's, view of the future, and as you see, LNG progressively growing. So a good industry to be in through to 2040, if you believe McKinsey. One thing you can say with some certainty is that as of today, the sun is shining on LNG. 140 million tons per annum of capacity is being built. There's lots and lots going on in the US. Qatar recently agreed, actually back in about a year ago, to build 3 more trains. Canada, on the west coast of Canada, this will be the first for Canada, not yet an LNG liquefier, are in the process of building 14 million tons per annum. And this Nigeria, this is the 7th train on Bonny Island. Also, within that 140, 15 million tons per annum, which has been financially sanctioned in Russia. Is it possible for Russia to build an LNG plant without any Western technology? In my view, probably not. But anyway, the news is good at the moment. And all of these people believe it, because if you look at the strategic plans for all of the major oil companies, they all see LNG as a significant growth opportunity. So what could possibly go wrong? The future is bright, except maybe governments don't believe that it's that bright. They all got together in Paris 7 years ago, and they agreed to this, that they would limit global warming to well below 2 degrees, and they would pursue efforts to limit it to 1.5. Forecasts are now that 1.5 will be breached either this year or next year, so they're not doing so well with the lower target. But then they've been making noises. So here we are. Mr. Biden promised to cut US emissions in half in the next 8 years. China, it will have no net CO2 emissions by 2060. The UK has enshrined in law that it will reduce emissions by 78, remarkably precise number, that 78% by 2035. The EU has said it'll reduce emissions by 20% in 2020, I guess, but 100% by 2050. This is a plot that McKinsey put together, which showed what actually had to happen to emissions in order to achieve these ambitious targets of Paris. And the interesting thing for me here was this so-called reference case. And their reference case said that renewables would generate 50% of power globally by 2035, so about 10 years from now. It's currently at 10%. Oil demand would peak in 7 years' time and then drop off. Gas demand would peak in 2037 and then drop off. And if all of those things happen, you'd see a global temperature rise of 3.5 degrees. In order to achieve the 1.5 degrees, essentially the world needs a COVID pandemic, because that's the reason for this little blip in the curve here, every year for the next 30 years. So I think you can say 2 things about the future with certainty. The governments of the world are going to fail. They won't achieve the target that they set themselves in Paris. But when you look at the difference between the promises they're making and the commitments for further investment in hydrocarbons, something's got to give. I'm going to skip that slide in the interests of time, because here's the big one about the future. Because somewhere between the plans of the oil and gas companies and the promises and hot air of government are a number of different solutions. Here's one: generate power with wind. Here's another: generate power with solar panels. All rush out and buy electric vehicles. Electric vehicles represent about 5% of sales still at the moment. There's a long way to go. Invest lots of money in electrical transmission, but of course the issue with renewable energy, as we all know, if the sun stops shining and the wind stops blowing, you don't have any power at all. So there has to be some backup system batteries are very, very expensive. At the moment, as I see it, the only real option for backup is Homer Simpson and nuclear power. There is opportunity for hydrogen. I'm working on a couple of hydrogen projects, one in South America and one in Texas, of all places. It has a role. Carbon capture and storage has a role. Planting more trees has a role. Biofuels has a role. Ammonia as a fuel has a role. This is the question I wanted to leave you with. How is the world going to choose between all of these different possibilities? How will the market decide what to do? And I think the big problems that the oil and gas companies have at the moment is the decisions are not being made by the market mostly. The decisions are mostly being made by governments. And as we both know, governance can be fairly random in their decision-making process. At some point, I think this will be the answer. At some point, there'll be a global carbon price. They tell me that as of today, 20% of the world's CO2 emissions have some form of carbon price on them. So 80% don't. So largely at the moment, if you're running an oil and gas company, it's hard to know where you should be strategically until the market takes control. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if I finished on time, but I have finished. So that's the good news. And at which point I think I hand back to Phil. And if anybody has any questions, I'll do my best.
Thanks very much, Malcolm. Thanks a lot. That was all very interesting indeed, and clearly you've got much more behind the story than you've presented today. There are a few questions. I'm going to deal with the general one right at the beginning, and if you don't mind, I'll deal with that question.
More than happy.
And that was, would we please share the slides? And I just wanted to let people know that that's generally not our policy with the free webinars to share the material. Some of the material presented is proprietary. I know the session's being recorded, and you can always look back on the recorded thing, but it's not our policy to physically send the slides out and share them with people. So I hope you'll bear with us for that. Okay, let's talk about some of the other questions then. An interesting question about small scale. So the question basically is what about the cheaper modular small scale LNG? There are major issues for independent producers, in terms of cost for LNG projects. And so if there's a small scale gas reserves where maybe the gas is being flared, then what about the future for these micro or small scale LNG projects? Do you see those fitting into the picture, Malcolm?
It's happening. I think now what's it's venture LNG in the States that have recently announced, financially sanctioned, in fact, I think it's 18 million tons per annum of LNG, which they're using a new technology for. It's Baker Hughes, which is a GE company, and those 18 million tons per annum are produced in 18 different trains, 18 different modular units, fabricated off-site, relatively simple technology, relatively low cost, and delivered to low schedule. So they have a niche. They have a niche. Whether they're coming to Nigeria or not, I doubt, but potentially, for as I said in one of the slides I put up at the beginning, GTL is largely gone because that space that was occupied by GTL fits nicely with micro LNG, relatively low quantities, relatively large distances. So it's happening. It's happening. How far will it go? I'm not sure.
Thanks very much, Malcolm. Thanks. There's a couple of questions basically which pick up on your last few slides, which talk about the sustainable ideas and climate change and everything, and these alternative sources of energy. wind and solar and things. Can you say a little more about how you actually see LNG in the future picture? What's your view on these big projects that are in the planning stages and so on? Are these going to happen? What's the story there?
Remember that there is what did I say? It's currently world production 450 million tons per annum, 140 million tons that has been financially sanctioned. So it's going ahead. I've got the number in my head, 892 million tons per annum. That is in a pre-FID stage. They definitely won't all go ahead, because if you looked at the total world demand, I'm trying to pull numbers out of the air at the moment, but I think I said there's something like 500 billion cubic meters per annum of pipeline export. If all of those LNG projects went ahead, it would completely displace it would completely distort the current market. If they all went ahead, the price would tank. So they won't. But the thing that I'm reasonably confident in, there will be, if you looked at where is the action going to be out of those 892, United States, Canada, and I think you will see lots of big plants coming on stream in North America.
Thanks, Malcolm. Okay, new couple of questions coming in. Question about Africa and the developing countries. How do you see them with their large gas reserves taking advantage of the current demand in LNG?
Where are we on? Actually, can I just, if you'll excuse me, can I hop back to I'll hop back to one of the earlier slides. You got that one? So where do we have the large reserves in Africa? We have Nigeria, obviously. We have Algeria. We know we have Mozambique, don't we? Where are the Egypt was an LNG exporter, but domestic consumption is so large that they export very little nowadays. The big hope is Nigeria, I think, but I'd welcome the views of others, especially those who are in Africa. I think the future in terms of LNG probably isn't Africa. Would somebody like to disagree with me?
Well, I think there are other countries in Africa that could potentially have LNG, but they have some other domestic or political issues going on, and some of those Eastern African offshore gas reserves, which certainly appear to be there, but are not being developed because of the political climate in the countries.
Maybe an opportunity for floating LNG. The interesting for me with the floating LNG is, aside from Shell, there haven't been that many. There haven't been that many takers. There are a couple of projects, but quite a bit smaller than the Shell one.
Okay, yeah, right. So maybe we can take another question just before I think maybe I'll hand back. This is really about Europe and the Russian war. Given that the spot market is about 40% and there's significant capacity in regasification, then why is Europe not reacting by moving quickly towards taking advantage of the spot market for LNG?
Isn't that a good question? Because the capacity's there. The capacity sometimes is in the wrong place, I think, in that large capacity in the United Kingdom, some capacity in France. Of course, where it's needed in order to displace Russian gas is in Germany, is in Italy, Poland, Romania, where I don't have the numbers to hammer. I think the capacity isn't so large. But of course, the other side is supply, isn't it? It's there's still the choice under the current contracts with Russia. You'd be buying gas at I'll do million BTUs, maybe $4 or $5 per million BTUs. If you go into the LNG spot market, you could be paying 10 times that. And of course, ultimately, if you pay 10 times that, that cost has to be passed on to consumers. And what do consumers do when you charge them 10 times as much money? They vote you out of government. So there's some really tough decisions in Europe at the moment. I think, seriously, if in 3 or 4 years, most of that Russian gas can be displaced. But it isn't something that's it's not something that's going to happen in weeks. I really wish I didn't. If I did know the future, I'd be a lot richer than I am. But you'd think that Mr. Putin has done some really serious long-term damage to Russia's economy by essentially no longer being a trusted supplier. Did that answer the question? Do you want to have
I think so. Thanks, Malcolm. I think there's a follow-on question around the African situation with potential gas reserves and things, and this is really, I think, a view on funding. So, given the insecurity with the Russian situation, do you think that that there will be a better appetite for Western funding involvement in developing African gas reserves?
I think it's possible, but if you are a financier, and at the moment you're thinking about which of the LNG prospects around the world is going to represent the best return for you and the lowest risk, I think you'd head towards the United States, towards Canada. I think, and the quantities on the drawing board there are just are so large. I have a feeling that it will drown out many of the other LNG projects around the world.
Thanks.
So again, sorry, I want to prove me wrong. I want to be proved wrong, but I think for LNG, Africa maybe isn't the future.
Okay, thanks very much for that. One final question, maybe. I'll just read it out because I haven't quite digested it myself yet. It says, just for general info, which do you stand? Gas availability for domestic consumption or gas accessibility for imports?
Gas for domestic consumption or gas for imports?
Maybe that means exports. I'm not 100% sure. Let's treat that as a question which says, yeah, indeed, it says export. So it should say export. So basically, it's you've got some gas. Where do you see the justification for its use? Domestic consumption or export it for money?
Again, a view, but the dominant need will always be domestic consumption. Because if I mean, there's the possibility in Europe of blackouts, isn't there, and gas rationing and so on. When the lights go out, people are going to vote for a different government. So governments won't survive if they don't supply their local population, is my view. And Europe is curious at the moment. So with this aim to eliminate Russian imports of gas. So for example, at the moment, there's quite a bit of cross frontier trading in gas between the UK and Europe, for example. Now, in order for that embargo to sustain itself, actually Germany and Italy and various other countries have to be fed. When it comes to it, though, is the United Kingdom going to decide to curtail exports to the continent? There's interesting times ahead. I don't know the answer, but I think always domestic consumption will come before export, because governments won't survive if their populations don't have power and heating.
Yeah, maybe I could just add
Please do.
slightly Another view to that, just to put some more numbers to the picture. If you take Nigeria as an example, and you build in some of the figures you've been quoting, Malcolm, then domestic gas attracts somewhere, if you're lucky, in the region of about $2 to $2.3 per million BTU in Nigeria. Whereas the exported LNG, as you've quoted, is around the $8 to $10 per million BTU. So there's a big margin there. It costs you $4 to make an LNG plant. It's probably a bit less if you're adding another train. But there's a margin of about $4 in LNG export. There's a margin of less than $2 because you've got to pay for your processing plant for domestic. So that there is always that tension and challenge, even though there may be a political appetite to satisfy local demand. There's an economic challenge that the export is in many cases a more economic project than the local domestic gas market.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, with that, it's 12:40. I think what I'll do is I'll hand back to Akanimo and let him close the session. Thank you very much.
And I need to work out how to stop sharing, I think, don't I?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Malcolm and Harrison, for that in-depth into the subject matter. We've learned a bit more about what we know about LNG. You've covered the history. For me, it's interesting to know that it has actually, the first shipment was made about 60 years ago. That was good to note. And also you you talked about the process, how it's being done, how the gas is being processed from gas to liquid, and how it's been turned back into gas. And you also mentioned about the process being not very simple. You also touched about where we are right now in terms of where the market is across the globe, which is good. And then you touched a bit about the future as well, which is very key. As you said, we're not sure of how it's going to be. The best we can do is to project, and we are seeing more tension from what is happening in Ukraine. That has really turned things around. You also talked about, we've also seen questions around how countries in our continent, the African continent, we can take advantage of this to ensure that we also try to put our foot forward. Malcolm mentioned that that might not happen, but we hope to prove you wrong over time. Let's see how it goes. So thank you very much. Thank you. We hope our government will get it right, and that's part of why we have this kind of series. We have a young talent among our midst, and we're hoping that they'll find their way to government at some point to create the right policies that will turn things around. Once more, thank you very much, Phil and Malcolm. We hope we will be able to have these slides, but we can talk about that after now. So thank you very much. So at this point, we will move over to our upcoming events that we have for the section. Next, well, the date has not been fixed. We'll have our Lego robotics, which from what I know should happen between now till the end of the month. The date has not been fixed as well. We also have our renewable NLG CSR, which again should happen before the end of the month. So please just take note of these programs. The annual general meeting for the section will happen in July 30th. That's the end of next month. So please put a date on that. Also ongoing right now is our own a scholarship event. This is not new to us. We tend to have this each year, where we tend to award the best in various schools. This is the way we take part in making sure that we have the youth have a brighter future. So moving on to other events. So you can connect with us through our various platforms, which we have active as a section. You can connect to us through LinkedIn, Twitter, Telegram, Facebook, and also YouTube. We have a number of events lined up, and as always, you always get an email, but if you want to see what we're doing and the pictures and the videos, you can always go to our social media platforms. If you want to know more about us or be a member, we have people you can reach out to. Odion is there, Uju as well, and Chineyem. You can always reach out to them. They'll guide you through the process. So as you know, we are SPE, and this is to say thank you all for taking part in this event. We look forward to seeing you in our next event. So thank you, Phil, and thank you, Malcolm.
Yeah, I can. Sorry,
So,
if we could take some pictures before. We
okay,
go.
yes. So at this point, you can turn on your video. So at this point, we are all allowed to turn on our video. So we take a group photograph. Oh, mine has been off. I didn't know my video has been turned off. Sorry. Okay, so we can all turn on our video at this point. I don't think we have so much. Priscilla, B, I don't think we are seeing you.
Yeah, my video is on.
Okay, yeah, we can see B. Okay, let's just have a few more people turn on their videos, and we'll go ahead. All right, I will go ahead right now. Let's put some smile on our faces. Thank you. I'll take a few. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay, I can't anymore. I think I'm good. Over to you.
Okay. Okay. All right. So thank you all. So at this point, I'll bring the webinar to a close. Thank you all.
Hey guys, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.